Maybe the most shocking move of the offseason so far. Grayson Rodriguez for Taylor Ward, 1-for-1. So we got to do an Orioles Angels crossover. That's coming up next.
You are Locked On MLB Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello there, Orioles fans and Angels fans and everyone in between. We've got a Locked On MLB crossover here today. I am Connor Newcomb, host of the Locked On Orioles podcast, and I will throw things to John, who is here with me to discuss, an interesting trade so far this offseason.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Connor. And for those who might not be familiar from the Locked On Orioles side, my brother Mike and I, we do Locked On Angels. We co-host that show together as the Super Halo Bros. So there you go.
So we are going to be talking about a trade that now it's almost been a week since it went down and is still sending reverberations, probably more in Baltimore than it is in Anaheim, just because of the players who were dealt, but certainly an interesting deal. We're going to talk about Taylor Ward, what he brings to Baltimore in his 1 year and maybe more over with the O's trying to win. And then the Angels side of the trade, getting 4 years of Grayson Rodriguez. We'll talk about how good he is at his peak and also the injury concerns that made him available at this point. And a little discussion on, it's a little harder to decide this right now, but who may have won this trade at this point. But that is all coming up on this crossover episode, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So the trade, if you haven't heard already, the Orioles sent starting pitcher Grayson Rodriguez to the Los Angeles Angels. In return, they received outfielder Taylor Ward. It was a 1-for-1 swap. There was even, John, 30 minutes before we're recording this, another weird 1-for-1 swap when Marcus Semien and Brandon Nimmo were traded for each other. So I'm not even sure this is the weirdest trade so far of the offseason, and we're only in November.
Especially all these 1-for-1 swaps. Like, how often does that happen, too? Yeah.
I love a 1-for-1. It's interesting. Before we jump into Taylor Ward, I will just give my quick little initial reaction, because it was very different in Baltimore. That trade came across around 11 p.m. Eastern time. So
right.
I was honestly, luckily not asleep, because most nights on a weeknight by 11 p.m. Eastern time, when there's not an Orioles game that night, I'm probably already asleep. Had a 10-minute phone call as soon as the news broke with a fellow journalist who covers the Orioles, just to get our brains wrapped around what in the world just happened. And basically that's how I've spent the last week, is wrapping the brain around what would be the reason to trade Grayson Rodriguez. I'm sure the reaction is a little different from Angels fans, because it makes a little more sense and maybe more expected to trade someone like Taylor Ward. But what was your initial reaction to this kind of trade?
Yeah, I was shocked that they finally did trade Taylor Ward, because he's been one of, if not the most valuable asset the Angels have had that is coming up on an expiring deal, right? And the Angels have not capitalized on guys that they have that are on expiring deals. Does anybody remember Shohei Ohtani in 2023, right? They didn't make the deal then. They didn't make it in 2022 when he had a year and a half of control. Apparently the Padres were like, here, have Jackson Merrill and a bunch of other studs at one point, and the Angels didn't consider making that move. Now, you can make the argument that they weren't very far out of a wild card spot in 2023, but that's neither here nor there. I think the fact is that they are finally squeezing some value out of the sponge that is Taylor Ward and his contract. And the fact is, he had a great year last year, and we were just shocked because they've often sat on their hands with players that it makes sense to make a deal like this. And to get 1 year of Taylor, or I should say 4 years of Grayson Rodriguez for 1 year of Taylor Ward, that just was not normal for the Angels, but it was very welcome for, I think, a lot of fans. There are some people who are heartbroken because Taylor Ward's an Angel lifer, drafted by the team, came up with the team, really hit his stride in 2022, and has just been a great person and a great human being. So not to get ahead of myself here, but I think Orioles fans are going to come to find out that they're getting a really great person in Taylor Ward.
And that's what we want to talk about in the first segment, is kind of, how does Taylor Ward fit in Baltimore? And more so from your perspective, what does he bring to the Orioles? And he'll be 32 in a couple weeks now. He is an impending free agent. So after 2026, unless the Orioles get something done, he will hit free agency. And From the outside perspective, he's seemingly coming off a very Taylor Ward season. I know the average
Right.
was lower than it had been, but he also upped the home runs to 36. And I think the best thing that Orioles fans have loved is that 156 and 157 games played in back-to-back years.
Yes.
Every Oriole hitter except for Jackson Holliday was injured in 2025. So it's really nice to add someone who's basically going to play every day. So from what you saw in 2025, I would say from the outside, one of the more consistent Angels this year. What would you say is the 31-year-old version of Taylor Ward? What does that look like as a player? And then hopefully that can be the 32-year-old version for the Orioles.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you mentioned there is health, right? The only reason Taylor Ward has not played was he took a Alek Manoah sinker to the face that ended his 2023 season. In 2022, he was off to a hot start and kind of ran into an outfield wall, and that really kind of messed him up the rest of the year. But I will say that nothing that Taylor Ward has been out for has been like, a quad strain or an oblique strain. So he's never been out for anything that it's just kind of your body and wear and tear. It's always been kind of a freak accident thing. I mean, toward the end of 2025, he was diving for a ball and went face first into the corner of the Astros scoreboard, right? And so it's always been stuff like that. And so maybe that speaks to how hard he tries to play out there, but at the same time, he is a very consistent presence. He's very healthy, and I think that that's something that Orioles fans can look forward to. I will say too, regarding the power numbers and maybe even strikeout numbers and the batting average, it wasn't just a Taylor Ward issue. It was a wholeheartedly coaching issue. The whole Angels team had the fourth most home runs in baseball this year, but the worst strikeout rate, the highest number of strikeouts in the league. And so those home runs didn't really help them out all too well. They also didn't capitalize on the fact that Taylor Ward was batting cleanup for them and drove in over 100 RBIs, but from the cleanup spot, you kind of should drive in over 100 RBIs, right? And so for as many home runs as he had, I think 22 of them were solo home runs. So I say all that because, again, health is key, especially in this conversation about Grayson Rodriguez and his health and then what you're getting in Taylor Ward. But again, a good guy. And I also think that his contributions to the Orioles might look a little bit different under some different coaching when it comes to whoever your hitting coach might be, and a de-emphasis on just trying to hit the long ball as the entire Angels lineup did last year.
Yeah, a different group in the hitting sense. All three hitting coaches from last year gone from Baltimore. Dustin Lind as the hitting coach coming over from Philly. Brady North is in as the assistant hitting coach from Tampa, and they hired Donnie Ecker as the bench coach, who had been the quote-unquote offensive coordinator for the Rangers for the past 4 years. So a lot of new hitting minds in there. With the hitting, Ward essentially sacrificed some average and some contact for the power this year. And it ended up giving him a little more production. You go by WRC+, he had his best season since that huge breakout year in 2022. So he was overall a better hitter. From someone who's watching the Angels pretty much every day, did you see a big approach change? Was there something drastic swing approach change, or was it more he probably did some little things and this led to opening up the power and maybe being okay with sacrificing a little batting average?
This is something I got to warn you guys about. And it is that when Taylor Ward is on, man, he's the best player on the planet. But he is streaky. I think it was Scott Braun on Foul Territory who said he reminds me of Justin Upton. And I was like, that's a perfect comparison, because when he goes cold, and he's frustrating and it's hard to watch sometimes, but then you get a good, 3 weeks of on fire Taylor Ward. So you really have to take the good with the bad. The other part of it is that he might be the biggest guess hitter in all of baseball. When he guesses right, he's going to crush it. And sometimes he'll guess wrong and he'll stare at strike three right down the middle in a clutch moment. And you're going, what are you doing? This is right there. Right. And so that's what's going to come with Taylor Ward, is a lot of good streaks, a lot of bad streaks, and then maybe some frustration with how often he's up there guessing, how often he lets the perfect pitch go by. That's going to happen to any player, right? But if you watch, 162 games of one team for a whole season, like you do for the Orioles and I do for the Angels, you start to notice those things and you start to see how much those stand out, especially in crucial moments where you just want them to come through. I will say this too, Connor, when Taylor Ward is not the guy, because in this 2025 Angels lineup, he was the guy. And I know Mike Trout was in that lineup. I know Joe Adell went off this season, but Trout did not have a Trout-like season. He was hurt. He played 130 games for the first time in like 5 years. When Taylor is surrounded by great talent, and I think that he slots into the Orioles lineup very, very well, and there's a lot of great talent on that team. When he's just one of the guys, I think that's a really good position for him to be in. So I'm encouraged on what he's going to bring to Baltimore next season.
And then I just have to get, on the same wavelength of watching him every day. I think this is the question because I've seen him play out there mostly when the O's are playing the Angels. And I know the arm's not great out in left field. Teams will generally test the arm, but overall he doesn't grade out poorly, at least defensively. But I always trust still more the eye test of someone who's watching him every day out there. So are we a thumbs up? Are we a sideways? Are we a thumbs down on the Taylor Ward left field defense at this point? Like, even if it's just a thumb sideways, that's okay with me.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to go with a thumb sideways. And the reason being is because he grades out the way that he does is because he plays a very safe left field. And so he's not making too many mistakes. He's not diving and, getting a defensive run saved. And he's also not diving and missing horribly and losing a defensive run saved, right? So he has played a very nonchalant left field, sometimes, dare I say, even an aloof left field. And so you might see, and again, this might go back to coaching. Maybe somebody will get in his ear in Baltimore. You might see guys try to take an extra base on him when it's not really necessary. The best way I can describe it to you is this. When he knows that it's a double, he's going to say, all right, that guy's getting to second base no matter what I do. So you might see him kind of tra-la-la-la-la out there in left field, right? Like, yeah, you want him to hustle. It's almost like he's reserving himself for when he does need to make the bang-bang play or what have you. But, every now and then you'll see an outfield assist. You might see a play at the plate, and you're just like, Taylor Ward did that? So, in the same way that the offense is streaky, I think the defense kind of does the same thing. But again, the best way I can put it to you is he plays a very safe and nonchalant kind of left field out there.
Safe is not one word I would describe in acquiring Grayson Rodriguez right now. The highs, the potential highs and the potential lows. Wow, what a graph that is. Let's talk about it from the Angels side going to get Grayson. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles and Locked On Angels podcast, the crossover here, is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. And it keeps every game exciting, whether, your team is making that late push or maybe things aren't going too well. John, I'm not sure if you're a Laker fan, a Clipper fan, maybe even a Kings fan or a Warriors fan, but I can tell you one thing. It's all better than being a Wizards fan. So if you are watching the Wizards over here in the Mid-Atlantic, it can become at least a little more exciting at FanDuel. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Connor Newcomb and John Frisch, hosts of Locked On Orioles and Locked On Angels. We got a crossover episode here to talk about the trade heard around the world from last week, Grayson Rodriguez for Taylor Ward. And John, I got to turn it over to you because listen, the Orioles are getting more of, even though we talked about Taylor as a streaky player, they're getting more of the sure thing. He's been most of the same hitter for 4 years. I will say 2022 was like a separate level of good, but mostly the same player for 4 years. He has been healthy. He's got 1 year left, so you feel like you can kind of know what he'll be his entire time in an Orioles uniform because it could just be one more year. The exact opposite is Grayson Rodriguez. He's got 4 years of team control remaining. He's been awesome at times when he's been on the mound. Let me say when he's been on the mound, because that has not happened since July of 2024. And you might say, Connor, did he get Tommy John surgery? That's a pretty normal timeline. No, he didn't get Tommy John surgery. In fact, he didn't get any kind of surgery until August of this year. So I see the floor to you, John, in terms of from the Angels' perspective, what do you feel that between Angels brass, Angels fans, you and your brother on the show are kind of asking about and want to know from the Orioles side? Like, what is this Grayson Rodriguez experience going to be like?
Yeah. I think Mike and I, our initial reactions are, like I mentioned in the first segment, is, okay, the Angels finally got some value for an expiring contract, which is more than they've done with a lot of the guys that they've let just walk or not move at the trade deadline. So that's a very good thing to see. Another thing we felt good about, 1 year of Ward for 4 years of Grayson Rodriguez. Knowing the injury history, knowing what's come with him, and knowing the circumstances, it almost feels like, well, 2026, it'd be great if things all went right. But if it takes him a little while to, get out of the block, then there's 27 and 28, 29. And if he's on an innings limit, which seems to be, all indications are, he probably will be on some sort of innings limit and not pitch all of 2026. Well, again, we've got 27, 28, 29, barring a lockout, right? And so I think, Connor, like the biggest thing is we're happy that there's maybe a little bit of foresight that the Angels have actually had, because again, they tend to take things year by year, and it's very frustrating. They've already, you saw Kurt Suzuki gets a 1 year deal. Perry Manassian has 1 year left on his GM contract, yada, 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 right? However, to have team control of a guy who has not even hit arbitration yet, that feels really good to Angel fans and whatnot. But I got to tell you, the most we've heard from our listeners and viewers on Locked On Angels is, well, what about the injuries? And what about the fact that, he hasn't pitched since July 31st, 2024? Can you reassure us of anything, or should we be as worried as some of our audience has been? What do you say?
Yeah, it's let's play the Grayson Rodriguez injury timeline game, because it has been something that unfortunately has followed him. And the funny part about it, John, is that it's not this guy's elbow can't stay healthy. He had Tommy John at 17, and then he had it again at 25, and here he is. That TJ has not happened. And that is the other thing that's a little concerning, because this is not the actual case, but it does feel like if you're a pitcher and you're going to have a 10-plus year big league career, it just feels like you're going to have Tommy John.
Yeah, at some point. Yeah, especially when you throw that hard that he does,
Exactly. Yeah. And for Grayson, it's been a different issue. And that's why I think the Orioles were more willing to move on, because although Tommy John doesn't mean you're going to come back fine, it gives you an answer. There's been so many Tommy John surgeries. The timeline is going to be somewhere between 12 and 18 months. That the elbow can bounce back. Pitchers can be just as good as they were when they come back from the surgery. Granted, they're not 37 years old or something when they come back from that surgery. We know enough about it to feel okay.
Yeah.
The issue with Grayson is the questions here with the injury. So it really started in 2022. He was in AAA. He was knocking on the door of the big leagues. The Orioles, back in 22, they had finally come out of the rebuild. They were turning things around. They put together a 10-game winning streak in June and July. They had a winning record. They were going to be in the wild card race. And Grayson had like a 2 ERA in the first couple of months in AAA. He was the top pitching prospect in baseball. And it was like, this is the guy they're going to call up after the All-Star break, and they might get to the postseason.
Yeah.
Feels something in his shoulder, comes out of a game in June. It's called initially kind of a minor back or lat issue, turns into a little more of a major issue. He does come back to pitch in rehab games in September, but at that point, the O's were kind of out of it in the final 2 weeks of September. It wasn't worth pushing him to bring him back, so they shut him down. Come back in 23. He doesn't make the team out of spring. He should have. O's get a pitcher injury in the first week, so Grayson gets called up anyway to make his major league debut. He's awful in his first 10 starts.
Yeah.
Gets sent down, comes back mid-season in 2023, and just dominates
Yeah.
down the stretch. It's like 13 starts of like a 2.8 ERA. He starts game 2 of the ALDS against the Rangers. Didn't pitch well, but the fact that he started game 2 for a 101 win team shows you how good he was.
Right.
Comes back in 24, looks good, looks healthy, not as good as he was down the stretch the previous year, but still good. And then here comes the lad again.
Yeah.
Scratched from a start after throwing in the bullpen in early August of 24. Again, it's the lat. He just keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and eventually the Orioles just shut him down. No surgery, but they're like, we just don't have enough time in the season for him to come back. He comes into spring 25. They're like, the lat's fine. He's good. Elbow issue in March. Tries to come back in April. Lat issue in April. Tries to come back again later in the year. Another elbow issue. Eventually it comes out that he had, these like bone spurs, the loose bodies in his elbow.
Right.
He gets the debridement surgery, and then it comes out, this week that he had those bone spurs for like 3 years. And he just didn't get the surgery until August. And now, we don't know because the Orioles, he did throw in October. He wasn't going to come back in the season, but he started a throwing program in October.
Yeah.
But then we had Grayson saying he's going to start throwing in January, or maybe Paramanasian said that he might start throwing in January. So the timeline's off again. I worry that the O's saw him throw in October and got even more concerned about what it looked like. Here's where I kind of fall. This is from a 2% of a little bit of insider knowledge talking to people, and 98% seeing Grayson, seeing Mike Elias, and hearing them both talk about the situation. My best guess right now is that the Orioles knew about the bone chips, pitching in some sort of pain, and maybe they felt like the bone chips were leading to all the lat issues. And Grayson publicly kept saying, I can't figure out the lat. I can't figure out the lat. He changed the delivery at one point a little bit. He's like, I just can't figure out why it keeps cropping up, because he had 3 different times he had a lat injury. I think the Orioles were maybe on par with Grayson, maybe thinking, hey, I think these bone chips might be what's causing it. And Grayson on Foul Territory this week, I believe, talked about how he considered surgery in spring training, went against it, and then got it in August. My educated guess, not reporting as fact, but educated guess, is that the Orioles wanted Grayson to get that surgery in spring training, because that debridement surgery does not take you out for the year.
No.
It's 2-3 months. He could come back after the All-Star break and hopefully be the Grayson the Orioles know and love.
Right.
And I think there was some disagreement because I get it. Pitchers don't want to miss time. He's saying, hey, I've had these for the last year and a half. And before the All-Star break last year, I pitched with them, and I pitched pretty well with them. I think I can pitch with them again and not miss all this time. And the Orioles said, listen, if you keep putting this off, there's a chance you just don't pitch anyway. And I think the Orioles were right. And Grayson eventually realized that and got the surgery in August, which of course ended his season.
Sure.
And when all this happens to a guy who's already having other injury issues, I think you just get fed up. And I think both sides were maybe a little fed up with each other. And maybe a divorce here was kind of the best thing. And so I don't really know how this happened, whether the Orioles, I know the O's wanted Taylor Ward. So I don't know if Grayson came up in Taylor Ward conversations, or if the Orioles just said, whatever, we're going to shop Grayson Rodriguez. And the Angels said, now, you know what? That would be something that would get us Taylor Ward, because maybe that never came up in the talks before.
Right.
Maybe the Angels were like, we want Grayson Rodriguez. And the Orioles were like, stop.
Right.
But now that they decided that, they said, oh, I could get Taylor Ward like that. Let's just do it because we want Taylor Ward. I'm not sure until we get that long form reporting, a year from now, about what actually happened on the insides of Grayson Rodriguez and Mike Elias and the agent, and like Grayson's dad is a big player in this as well. He's very involved as well. But I'm very intrigued to see all that. But that's the long version of essentially how we got here. I don't think we still 100% know why this trade was taken, but essentially from the Mike Elias view of the Orioles, it is, we know this could be a terrible trade for us. We know how good Grayson is at his peak. We know he has legit number 1 all-star type stuff as a starting pitcher and is still young with control. But we are so convinced that he's going to miss more time and don't think that we can trust him to be healthy for 30 starts a season. And I think the other big thing was, we don't know what we're going to get out of him in 2026. We know what we're going to get out of Taylor Ward in 2026. And Mike Elias might be saying, we need to win in 2026, or I'm not going to be the GM of the Orioles in 2027 because of how poorly last year went. And so I think the Angels on one hand could kind of take advantage of that because they're saying,
Yeah.
is 2026 important for us? Yes, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Right? Perry's on a 1-year contract. Suzuki's on a 1-year contract. It might look different no matter what happens in
Exactly.
2026.
Exactly.
And that's different for the Orioles. That's kind of where we are. Me personally, I've been a huge believer in Grayson, and I think if he's healthy, he will make multiple all-star teams. I think he will be a legitimate potential, 1/2 kind of guy.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen, it's not Tommy John. It's all this other stuff. I just don't know if he's going to be healthy.
Yeah. It honestly, it feels like a lot of, back and forth. Obviously the injuries are concerning, but the way you explained it, I think kind of shed some light on, why would they make that? I think that's really what the biggest question was, is like, why would the Orioles do this? And like you said, as stuff has come out within the last week about his bone spurs and how he felt like that was affecting his lat. And I don't know. I would subscribe to your educated guess of maybe they wanted him to get that done, that cleanup done, and it affected him again, and he didn't do it. If I'm looking from the outside in, I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from all of this conversation is it's two sides that weren't really seeing eye to eye. It wasn't like publicly, it wasn't on fire or anything like that. But as I'm doing my research here, I think the biggest educated guess that I could make, and it kind of lines up with what you were saying, is it didn't seem like everything was happy in Birdland, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think it was the most amicable relationship between the two. And again, sometimes the breakup is best for both parties, and that may be where we went here. So up next, we'll just kind of talk about the trade from both sides. Is there a winner? What constitutes a winner? How long do we have to wait to see who would potentially win this trade? What it looks like in 26 versus 2029? All that to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this crossover episode of Locked On Orioles and Locked On Angels is also brought to you by Game Time. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans and cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It's frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I was on Game Time all of last week because I had some Jets friends coming up from DC that wanted to go to Ravens Jets. We didn't go because they didn't really want to see the Jets in person. And I understand that. I don't want to watch the Jets either. But I was on the app all week and I was like, we can go, because that was by far the lowest prices I was seeing anywhere. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. It's a Locked On Orioles, Locked On Angels crossover here to finish things up. John, from the Angel perspective, what would have to happen? Is there something that could happen this year? Would we have to wait until, Grayson's not a free agent until after 2029? Would we have to wait that long? Like, what would constitute a win on the Angel side of this trade?
I look at it in a couple of ways, and it's how does he address the issues that plagued the Angels pitching staff, not just the starting rotation, but the entire pitching staff, Connor. Honestly, the starting rotation had a 4.91 ERA, 28th in baseball. Runs against 320, 28th in baseball. 4.0 walks per nine, 27th in baseball. Too many walks, too many runs against, third worst ERA as a staff. Good at getting strikeouts, and I know Grayson can add to that. And so I think when I zoom out and look at what will constitute a win here is what does Grayson contribute to a starting rotation that was honestly one of the worst in baseball. And they're adding Reed Detmers back from the bullpen back to the rotation. That's a lock. So to start with Rodriguez and Kikuchi and Jose Soriano and Reed Detmers, obviously they need to add somebody else. I think it's a great place to begin. They got Mike Maddox from the Rangers somehow. I mean, the biggest criticism our own fans will say is, who would want to come to Anaheim? Well, somehow they were able to hire Mike Maddox away from the Rangers and bring him in as the pitching coach. So I will be interested to see what happens with Grayson Rodriguez under Mike Maddox as the pitching coach. But again, I think it's more of a time will tell sort of thing. I think that as Angel fans, it would be important to anticipate that he's not going to be everything we want him to be, but could be, but it might take more than 2026. So at this point, I think it's a win for both sides because the Orioles are in a very much different position than the Angels, obviously. I mean, we're no strangers to dealing with guys who are plagued with injuries. Look at Trout, look at Rendon. Rendon didn't even play last year, so we're no strangers to that. But real quick, I think that if I can zoom out at the end of the season and see how Grayson Rodriguez maybe lowered that ERA for the staff, maybe reduce those walks per nine for the staff, maybe showed flashes of being that frontline starter or the ace of the Angel staff. Maybe he's not an ace on every staff, but he could certainly be an ace on the Angel staff. I think those are some of the W's that I'm going to look for this season. When it comes to Taylor Ward and the Orioles, what would make this a winning trade for you guys?
Yeah, I think you have to look at it differently from Baltimore's perspective. I think for Angels fans, as you talked about, you didn't really mention Taylor Ward at all if it's a win, right? I don't think it really matters what Ward does in Baltimore because it's only one
people are going to be so upset at us though because we've wanted him to be traded, and the minute he hits 5 home runs across 2 games, I'm never going to hear the end of it. But I'll be happy for you guys. Just know that.
Right, but at the end of the day, were they going to re-sign him? I don't know. Does
Right.
it open up their outfield? They got really what they needed, and they got 4 years of it potentially. So from their perspective, it's like, you know what? Whatever he does, it's 1 year. He may not have been an Angel anyway. It's fully focused on can Grayson stay healthy and can he pitch well when he does that?
Totally.
From the Orioles, for it to be a success, you almost have to look a little bit at both sides because of what you gave up. Now, if Taylor Ward hits 30-plus homers, he's a 120, 125 WRC plus guy. He hits in the middle of the Orioles order and gives them that kind of offensive thump back to get them back to where they were the previous 2 years, which is a solidified, no doubt, top 10 offense in baseball. And if that helps the O's, get to an ALCS, finally win a playoff game for the first time since 2014. If they can win a playoff round, that would be amazing, right? If we can bring some playoff success back to Baltimore and Taylor Ward helps that, even if he leaves in free agency and goes somewhere else after the year, that in a vacuum is a win because you made your team better. However, you can't look at it in a vacuum. If you gave up 1 year of Grayson Rodriguez, I think you could, but you gave up 4 years of Grayson Rodriguez on a team that has struggled to develop pitching, and its number one thing on the to-do list this offseason is get starting pitching, and you traded away a starting pitcher. Now, you did it because you weren't sure if he could be that for you next year anyway.
Sure.
The thing with Grayson is, even if he's actually healthy in spring training, I don't know what he'll give the Angels in 26 because he hasn't thrown a pitch since July of 24. So he's going to be on, Perry's already talked about it. He's going to be on an innings limit. He may have to even work in relief some next year just to keep those innings down. Like Grayson, even if fully healthy, I've seen some Orioles fans be like, guarantee Grayson's top 5 Cy Young next year. I'm like, there's physically no chance that happens.
Right.
Because I would say an absolute maximum would be him making 20 to 22 starts. I mean, maximum.
Yeah.
Like there's no way. And as we saw with Trevor Rogers, who made 20 starts and had a 1.9 ERA and finished 9th in Cy Young, if you don't give that much volume, you just can't win the award. So that's not going to happen.
Exactly.
What the Orioles would have to keep an eye on is, okay, down the road, if maybe by 2027, we have a fully healthy and operational Grayson Rodriguez, or by 2028, that version could legitimately finish top 5 in the Cy Young. The changeup's ridiculous. The fastball's got good velocity. His secondaries are awesome. He's got good command to go with that stuff. We've seen flashes of brilliance. Even if Taylor Ward's that good, if the Orioles win a World Series with Taylor Ward this year, it doesn't matter what Grayson does. It literally doesn't matter.
Exactly.
But if it's anything short of winning a World Series, there's always going to be that little bit of, okay, in the 3 seasons after, 27, 28, and 29, what is Grayson doing? And if he looks like at any point for a stretch of more than, 15 starts, if he looks like the pitcher that was once promised in Baltimore, it probably becomes a loss for the O's if they don't at least win a pennant, let's say, in 2026. So it'll be really intriguing. it's tough for O's fans because we love Grayson Rodriguez,
Yeah.
but you have to bank on him still being injured and not having success to win this trade. So it's very, very odd. Again, unless they make some sort of World Series run, it's a very weird spot to be in from the Orioles side, giving up on that much potential. But the other thing is, like, O's fans are getting so frustrated with Mike Elias being so forward thinking, being so, we're always going to take into account future value, future value, future value. He skewed the complete opposite direction by saying, screw the future value. We're getting a player who we know is going to make us better in 2026 when we need to win right now.
Right.
So when you look at it from just that perspective, you say, maybe this is a nice change for the Orioles, but only time is going to really tell how this looks. And I think the perfect scenario, John, is that Taylor Ward plays well, the Orioles win some playoff games, and we bring some hope back to the Mike Elias regime. The O's are back to being, a top 5, 6, 7 team in Major League Baseball. And maybe if it's not this year, because again, he's going to be limited, but by 2027, Grayson Rodriguez gets healthy and has a good career. And as long as the Orioles can have postseason success in that time and Grayson himself can have at least individual success, I think this becomes a win-win. And that's, I think, the best I'm hoping for from this trade.
Yeah, I certainly think that you're not going to find anybody on the Angels side wishing ill of Taylor Ward. And it sounds like there won't be Orioles fans doing the same thing. So when it comes to the success of the Orioles and the Angels this season, I think we're all on the same side of the coin, especially with the players involved in this trade.
Yeah, it's an interesting deal. It's a fun crossover to do. If you are just hearing from Locked On Orioles and you want to hear more this season because you're an Angels fan and you love Taylor Ward and you want to see how that continues to go, you can check out Locked On Orioles wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. You can always email me also, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. And for the Orioles fans, who I think even more interestingly for the next 4 years, John, want to know what's up with Grayson Rodriguez, where can they find Locked On Angels?
You can find us, you can find the show on YouTube, of course. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts, at Locked On Angels on Twitter, at Super Halo Bros on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Orioles fans, those who listen to Connor every day, come on over, get in our comment section because we really want to hear from you. We would love to hear your perspective on this trade, and you can laugh at us when Taylor Ward hits 5 home runs across 2 games. So there you go.
A fun trade, an interesting trade, certainly a fun crossover, John. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. Really appreciate the time.
That is the Locked On Orioles, Locked On Angels crossover. We will both, of course, be back tomorrow on our respective podcasts on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.